18 years, which covers over medicines, medical devices, cosmetics, and food supplements. So a really nice broad range. I have expertise in scientific advice meetings, both in the preparation and leading them, and I lead the regulatory team here at Jensen R+. Just going to pass over to Anna to introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Anna Johnston. I'm a Principal Regulatory Officer at Jensen. I've got over 16 years' experience in the pharmaceutical industry. I've worked on a number of different types of projects that have included seeking scientific advice with the MHRA, so involved in both preparing submission packages, project managing, leading those meetings. So today I'm bringing my knowledge and experiences to help you when looking at scientific advice.
Okay, next slide. So just a little bit about Jensen R+. We are a specialised consultancy group, and we cover not only regulatory affairs but quality assurance and pharmacovigilance as well. And we really try to offer a bespoke service that can be tailored to meet your specific needs. We've been operating for more than 25 years, and we have a whole range of different clients, from small innovators right through to big corporations. We are over 50 employees. I think it's probably around 60 now. So we are in a growth stage. And we work, like we say, we work with partners not only in the UK, but across 40 different countries. We're also very proud to be part of RegularNet, which is a network of different consultancies across the world. And that allows us to give you a global service by just contacting one person. So we are very privileged because we get to work with, like we say, many different clients. And actually, that means that scientific advice meetings become our bread and butter. We have the opportunity to interact with the MHRA on a regular basis. For example, I think we did over 9 different scientific advice meetings just in 2025. So this means that we get a really good rapport going with the MHRA, and we really can see some of the trends that we see the MHRA coming out with, and we can then bring those learnings to our other clients. I'm going to pass over to Anna now, as she really is the expert in scientific advice meetings. Like we say, do ask questions in the chat. I think we'll probably come to them towards the end of the presentation, as Anna may answer your question as we go along. But if there's questions in the chat that I think can be answered, I can always type away as well. So happy to pass over to Anna.
Great, thank you, Wendy. Okay, so what is scientific advice? So before we can start, can I just ask that everyone on the webinar pops into the chat what experience you've had already? It might be nothing at all, it might be supporting your colleagues in the preparation stage, or it might be actually attending the meeting. It'd just be interesting to see where everyone's at. Okay. Okay, that's good. So there's some supporting the client, your clients and the company you work for, some little experience there, support. Lovely. That's good to see. There's a whole range of everybody there. Okay. So, although the advice from the agency is regarded as non-binding, it does allow you to engage with the regulator. So you're able to develop your strategies at the early stages of your projects when plans are aligned with the agency expectations. You're reducing your risks of challenges at later stages of project development and during the formal MHRA assessment. So let's move on. So let's see what your thoughts are at this point. Can you pop into the chat again any ideas you have on when you think scientific advice might be requested? Interesting. Yeah. That's good, Pamela. Okay, so we're getting a wide range of areas that people are aware of when you might seek scientific advice. So just to clarify, there are a lot of scenarios when the meeting may be of benefit. So you might want to build strength into your applications, clarifying regulatory expectations, so using best methods, the evidence you might be needed to submit, any studies to support product development, dossier preparation, changing to existing licenses. When you're planning major clinical trials, direction on CMC or non-clinical strategy, and reducing the regulatory risk before submission or of MA applications or reclassifications. Okay, so just to clarify what's not covered. So there's a list here, justifications on commercial strategy, pricing reimbursements, formal approval decisions, ethical improvements. So there's any topics that fall outside of the regulatory remit there. Okay. So, how does scientific advice support early engagement? So, although some time is needed for this stage, it can save time later on in the project in avoiding unforeseen challenges. So, with early regulatory engagement, you can clarify the expectations and de-risk any associated future submissions. So, with the tightening on the amount of RFIs issued during MA applications, this can be extremely beneficial. You have the opportunity to explore the regulatory flexibilities with regards to the data that might be accepted. Obviously, the guidelines are really useful, but when you have unusual circumstances, they don't quite fit. So, direct contact with the MHRA to discuss a pathway can be more useful for you. So, the advice that you receive, there's two different formats. You have got face to face. So, since COVID, a collective Teams call rather than an in-person meeting is the standard format. The face-to-face allows you to seek clarification on any advice given. It can allow you to explore challenges that the advice may present and discuss any extra but relevant information that's directly associated with your questions. We'll look at the questions in the coming slides. The other type of advice is just written. This can be quite limited. There's no opportunity for the open discussion. So you need to really ask yourself in relation to the question that you have, is this suffice? There's no difference in document preparation or the fees between the two types of advice formats. So MHRA offer both face-to-face and written advice independently. But also recently the MHRA and NICE initiated the Integrated Scientific Advice Service. So this is really useful and a great way to align on both the MHRA registration requirements and also the NICE clinical requirements. So it allows for more efficient assessment timelines. There's a webinar on the MHRA currently that explores the process in more depth. And also, Jensen R Plus have also written an article which focuses on the topics, which you can find on LinkedIn on our page. So, where do you start? So, do you need scientific advice on your particular project? So, you might want to consider what your aims are. Have you already looked at the guidance available? And does this really already answer your question? Do you know what the agency's policies are on particular subjects? What data do you already have? Do you know where your deficiencies lie? And how would a SAM fit into your project timelines? Okay, so I just got a question from Hamler here. I requested a face-to-face meeting recently. It was advised as MHRA is so busy, only written advice was available. So Pamela, did you submit the questions and everything in full, or was it a ad hoc meeting? It was in full. Okay. Might be there's different teams. So you have obviously like reclassification teams, and clinical trials teams and things like that. So it might be that that's the current climate for that particular advice. I wouldn't accept that as that's all it is for everything at the minute. So it might be that needs to be explored. You know, is that just now, or is it based on your questions, or is this general MHRA feedback at the minute? Okay. Okay. So let's look at who would attend. So you're likely to be limited to around 6 attendees from your side. So really look at who adds value to the meeting. Marketing colleagues are not usually in attendance since commercial aspects are not discussed. So, depending on the questions you have, it would be expected that the expert in that field attends and is ready for any discussions that might be needed. So, you'll also need to bring a meeting lead from your side, and they will really drive the conversation when it comes to seeking clarification on the advice, any challenges that may arise, exploring the advice given, and also inviting experts into the conversation. The role, as well as minute taking and timekeeping, are ones we often support with. This enables our clients to focus on providing that in-house expertise for the topics focused on discussions. Having a dedicated minute taker allows for a comprehensive set of meeting minutes. This really captures in detail any discussions that may not be included in the formal advice letter. I'll talk about the minutes in a later slide. Also think about your availability. So I'll talk about anticipated MHRA response times after you submit your request, but consider upcoming personal and national holidays periods that might impact your timelines as well. So let's take a look at an invented scenario. So here we have a scenario where the company sees an unmet patient need. They see a benefit in adding a second indication to a current license. The product is established in both UK and EU and has a good safety profile. The company are planning clinical studies that could be supported of the new indication. So it would be expected that the main focus on the scientific advice would fall around the clinical trial. So would you pop into the chat any top level questions that you think might be asked at scientific advice? Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, thank you. Good. Lovely. Thank you for those. So, yeah, so there'll be obviously key questions would involve the clinical trials, but you also might want to think about the new indication, whether it introduces new safety risks. So there might be PV type questions as well that might be asked, adapting risk management plans, product information, other mitigation measures may be suggested as well. Okay, so that's just top level what you might ask. So let's move on to costs. So MHRA do have a list of published fees. As you will see, there is a range from high to simple complexity. Although there is no specific guidance yet on this, from initial consultation for fees and on our own experience, this is really based on the number of experts from the MHRA side and the complexity of the questions. So it's very much still case by case assessment. To note, if you are or would be classed as a small or medium enterprise, the fees are waived. The MHRA provides guidance on the criteria and the application route to obtain SME status. There is a cost for this, but it is worth exploring as it could save you money in the long run when you go for scientific advice. So let's go back to the example and just take a look at where we might gauge the costs for this scenario. So how many specialists might be required? How complex are your questions? And what are the risks? How high are they? So initially we'd expect regulatory assessors to be in attendance. And if there's any PV questions, we'd expect a PV assessor to be in attendance to provide answers on these questions. We know that the big questions are around the clinical trials. So one of the clinical trial experts or more would be in attendance. So if deemed low risk indications not considered novel, the type of fee is likely to fall into the deemed category there. Just some questions here. It's the fee waiver for academics as well. Wendy, have you had any experience on academics
No, I,
applying?
I don't think it is.
Mm.
I believe it is only for those small to medium business enterprises, I'm afraid.
Oh, thank you. Pamela's answered that as well. Thank you for that. So, once you're confident you're asking the right questions, you've discussed planned dates for the SAM, you are ready to submit. So that's when it goes in. There's an online form that you'll fill in, um, and with your questions, that all goes in at the same time. So, as part of your application, you need to provide the MHRA with what's known as a briefing document. So, it doesn't provide the heavy details you would see in an application, but it is a significant document. It really outlines your position and any relevant background information. So, it's important that the narrative is clear and is appropriate so that the MHRA can provide and inform you of the accurate advice. That's due 15 days before your meeting. So, who will write the document? So, it's usually written by a person with experience writing briefing documents. They have experience of scientific advice meeting and with the dedicated time to prepare the document. When we write for these for our clients, we bring independent, unbiased perspective. So, whether you outsource this task or not, it can be really useful in the preparation to onboard someone who will really help surface assumptions and sharpen the company position within the document. What we want to achieve is to ensure the briefing document is clear and focused so that you receive really meaningful advice from the MHRA. So here are some of the areas which you may need to consider when preparing the briefing document. So think what else might be relevant to setting the scene? Does the MHRA really need to know the product background, the clinical use, and patient pathway? Never assume that the MHRA are fully aware of the patient journey or clinical pathways and any historical aspects of the treatment of the product. Take this opportunity, if it is relevant, to guide them through all of this. Um, there is a template for the integrated advice, but there isn't for the MHRA, but they are open to using the EU version for that or your own. Okay, so to revisit the key takeaways from preparing the briefing document, it should be concise, well-structured, evidence-based, clearly state the overall development objective, describe specific regulatory issues requiring advice, present the company's proposed position for each question, and include the supporting data. Okay. So, what can you expect after your request goes in? So, a meeting date is usually provided within a couple of days from your, couple of weeks, sorry, for your request. It could be your actual date could be as little as 4 weeks or as long as 3 months, depending on availability of the team. Obviously, factors such as coordinating schedules with MHRA experts will impact this, as will holiday seasons such as summer holidays and Christmas. Just touching again on the integrated scientific advice, once again, as you expect, there's two teams to coordinate here. So it may add to the expected timelines. As this service is quite new, there's no stats available on this yet. So if the MHRA feel that written advice is suffice, this may be enforced by the agency. Pamela, you've obviously had some experience of this more recently. Um, so as well as availability, it's usually when advice is aligned with the guidance already made available. Um, So when you do get a meeting date, at this point you will be asked for your final list of attendees. You'll also be provided a list of the MHRA experts attending. So at this point you can check that you have matching experts to reflect this. And it's difficult to change this list with the MHRA after this point. So it's advised to be sure you have all the right people available. So this includes your experts, your lead, any minute takers, or the whole list. Okay, so you only have 90 minutes in your scientific advice meeting with the MHRA. The NICE and MHRA integrated scientific advice meeting is scheduled for 2 to 3 hours. Plan for the anticipated responses. Plan time for this. You will recognise that some questions obviously will involve more discussion. Align on your roles. How will the lead manage the conversations? Which questions may particular experts be called upon? And rule out topics that are completely off limits. Okay. Okay, so you're just going back to Pamela's, your request is very complex, covering CMC preclinical and clinical data. Okay. Maybe we'll just pick that up at the end of the webinar, and we'll talk about that a bit more. Okay. So when anticipating MHRA feedback, think about multiple scenarios. So when would you challenge and revisit the data you've provided, conclusions from studies? Where are your compromises, like pack sizes, indication limits? Do you have any backup positions that might be more acceptable? And where are you likely to comply and align with the MHRA feedback? Really think about who will speak and discuss these scenarios so that you're ready for these conversations. So when it's time for the meeting, the following format can be expected. The MHRA will introduce the team. A declaration that the advice is not binding and subject to assessment will be made. The company can present some slides. These must be submitted when you submit the briefing document. But beforehand, ask yourself, is this of value to the meeting? Could it negatively impact that 90 minutes that you have? The lead will then move through the questions. MHRA will provide their advice, and then you'll have the opportunity to discuss, seek clarity on each response. So just some steps to avoid. So submitting any incomplete or poorly structured briefing packages, obviously that impacts the advice you're going to receive. Being ill prepared for the meeting discussion, so no one knows when to talk. Um, you know, just thinking out all those scenarios that might come about, raising questions outside the scope. You are limited to those questions because they have evaluated the advice that they want to give you. So bringing new questions is not allowed. Trying to negotiate or persuade others rather than seek guidance. Um, yeah, overloading the meeting with people or slides. That's why you're really limited to around 6 people. And ignoring the agency's written advice after the meeting. They know that they've given you advice, so when you're making an application, that will be taken into consideration. Although it's not legally binding, it has been offered. Okay. So after the meeting, so it's recommended to an internal debrief is scheduled straight away after the meeting. So here you can really align on the advice given. It's all fresh. It's recommended that the minute taker will share the written minutes with the company attendees so that you can cross-check everyone is aligned. These minutes are then submitted to the MHRA within 15 working days after the meeting. MHRA will provide official letter within 30 working days of the SAM, and the integrated advice, you'll receive it within 45. So you do have the opportunity to challenge any mismatches between the meeting and the official letter if you need to. Always recommend doing that straight away and not waiting too long for that. Okay, so and think about the wider company. Are there any other teams, people invested in the project that should know about the outcome of the SAM? It's recommended to keep document of any decisions based on the advice and plan for any follow-up SAMs if needed. Sometimes you don't always hear what you want to hear, but prepare for the next steps so that you can work through those challenges and keep momentum on the project. And just some tips for success. So start preparing a briefing document early, so at least 4 to 6 weeks before submission. Be precise, respectful, and scientifically objective. Really focus on those key uncertainties. You don't need to include everything, and keep the message consistent across all of your supporting documents. And really treat the meeting as a collaboration, not a negotiation. The MHRA are very supportive of getting companies' applications right. With you, not against you. So just a bit of a timeline overview. So we roughly leave about 1 to 2 weeks plus for evaluating, looking at ideas, uncertainties, so you know what questions you want to ask, to really preparing the questions and drilling down on exactly how you want to phrase it. 1 to 2 weeks on that, and then once you've collected all that information, around a week to fill in the form, get your questions together, and send your request in for scientific advice. And then the briefing document, obviously, if you, depending on the complexity of your topics, you can take around 4 to 6 weeks, might take longer. You'll obviously need to factor in review rounds and things like that. So it depends on, really depends on the team around you as well. So it can take longer than that, but that would be probably minimum. And then your meeting strategy. So as you build up to the scientific advice, we would schedule in 2 or 3 sessions so that you're all aligned. You know when you're going to speak. You know you feel really confident going into that meeting. You might want to create a little planner so that you can refer to that as you're in your meeting. And then you have the 90 minutes for scientific advice. Um, That's what it is. And then the reflection time. So you could spend a week or two. So you have your debrief meeting, the minutes always get circulated, everyone will align, everything will be all fresh still in that first 1 to 2 weeks, and the meeting minutes will get sent off to MHRA. And then the next steps. So we anticipate a minimum of 15 weeks to build up to the SAM and your debrief and reflection. And that is scientific advice meetings in a nutshell. So should you have any specific scenarios you'd like to discuss with us confidentially outside the webinar, we've got Ben Smith, our head of client success and partnerships, or you can contact Wendy or myself. So, shall we look at the questions? Wendy, have you been looking at those as we've been talking?
Yeah, so Pamela, you sort of mentioned that your request is very complex, covering CMC, preclinical data, and clinical trials. So it sounds like this would be one where you would need multiple experts from the MHRA in the meeting. And I think your question came up here when we were talking around the timings of the meeting itself, that it's only 90 minutes. So I think this is where, like Anna says, the preparation of your meeting and looking at the priority of your questions and where you want the feedback really comes in. Um, we've had good experience in the recent past of the MHR really reviewing the briefing booklet and the questions up front, so they've come very prepared with the answer and ready to discuss. So I think that could be helpful in your scenario if they come that prepared, that you know they're coming with a position that can be discussed and clarified, but you would be able to get quite a lot out of the meeting, I guess. But is there anything else you were wondering with your point here?
No, I just really wanted to highlight because I know they'd been really busy and everything was written, and my feeling was that was changing. So we were a little bit disappointed when we put the
Yeah,
request in beginning of April, and the meeting is going to be mid-June. Their internal meeting, if you like,
yeah,
and then we'll get the feedback. But I was slightly in two minds because in some ways, if they're providing the advice and obviously we're not minuting it, they've got to give us quite a lot of information.
yes,
So in some ways, it could be beneficial, if you see what I mean. So it would just be interesting to see how much detail comes through. As I say, because it's
absolutely.
complex. What we, there's like, I know, there's almost 20 questions. It's going to be interesting to know anyway. So I can let you know actually how it goes.
That would be
Yeah.
great if you don't mind sharing back. Like, has that actually been a benefit in that situation? And I think we had one situation last year where we were pushed to written advice, and actually it became quite a succinct answer that enabled us to move the project forward really well. So I think that there is some advantage to that written advice. Obviously, you're not also spending the time in the meeting for 90 minutes writing up minutes, so there's a little bit of time saved on that side as well. What I think could be challenging is if the guidance isn't clear from them, there's not necessarily so much of an option to go back and question them on it, I guess. I would still try, but that bit might be more difficult. But it'd be very interesting to understand, yeah, whether it has been beneficial to you having it in more detail from a written perspective.
And I think
Okay,
when there's
thank you.
when you have backup positions as well, it's difficult because obviously you want to save them for the meeting. You don't want to offer them straight away because if it's less risky and make sure we're okay, we'll go with the less risky option. So that really they are your backup positions, but you do want to have that opportunity to discuss them during the meeting. So you wouldn't necessarily pop it in your briefing book, but so yeah, that's a tricky one. Thank you, Pamela.
Yeah, thank you for
Okay.
sharing.
Are there any examples where the online guidance has been followed for a plan, but discrepancy has occurred with interpretation when having these discussions with the MHRA? I think if there is something about your application that compromises the guidance, that like you will, in certain scenarios, you will get unique circumstances where they do have to rethink the, the regulatory approach to it. So I don't know if I can think of anything off the top of my head, Wendy, but that could happen.
Yeah, and I guess that's where it depends on the question that you're coming forward with in your scientific advice meeting as well. So if you're going into a scientific advice meeting with an idea of what you're doing and you think you followed the guidance, is your question then if the MHRA are coming back and say no, we want to see something else? Yeah, and I guess the interpretation by the MHRA can be different on how they see it to how we see it, and I guess there will always be that interpretive nature. And we see that with all authorities, right? Where there is some guidance and different authorities will take a different view on exactly how that is read and how it is interpreted. I mean, we're going through a situation at the moment where there is a piece of guidance and we're being pushed back during a validation phase of an application, and we are quite sure that we are meeting the guidance and the MHRA are saying no, we need to do something else. So we are looking to sort of, challenge that, not in a scientific advice meeting, but I think, you will see that difference in interpretation at times. And scientific advice meeting would give you more opportunity to put your line in the sand, I guess. But like Anna says, there's a point where you have to sort of like listen to what they want because essentially they could put their foot down and say, no, this is how we see it.
Yeah, if there's like some sort of safety risk or something like that, um, obviously they'll take that into consideration more than what top level guidance might say. It's
Yeah,
difficult without knowing the situation, isn't it?
yeah. Are there any other questions anyone has? Or is there any part that you'd like us to expand on a little bit more? I think for me, one of the joys about having scientific advice is it does give you that sort of crystal ball into what the MHRA are going to concentrate on. So when you are building your application, you can really see the sorts of things that they are concerned about. And we've definitely had some really good outcomes from some scientific advice meetings last year that have enabled us to just tailor the submission package and really think about some of the justifications that we've put together to really support a successful application. So I think that um, you really can use scientific advice very, very wisely. Um, I think Michelle, your question there on are you limited to a number of questions? I would say no, but you are limited to an amount of time. So you do need to think about how much you can get through within those 90 minutes. And you might want to look at your questions and see if any of them can be grouped if they are in a particular area. Then you could look to group a question maybe just to ensure that you get through the questions within the meeting. And that's where your timekeeper becomes really important as well. The other thing that we actually tend to do is also have because obviously it's now all virtual, we do often have like an offline communication method just in case there's something that people want to be brought to the forefront and they want the lead to know about it. So that can sometimes also be useful just to enable that communication can really happen sort of behind the scenes, I guess, a little bit and ensures that the right things are brought to the attention of the MHRA that could influence their position on a particular question. Any further questions? I'm not exactly sure what you mean there. I think they definitely go. As I said, I think there's definitely a review process behind the actual meeting itself. So I think the opinions that are given are probably from a set of people rather than just one. I think they'll also be going against like the legislation and really reading into what the requirements are. Um, so I would say it's not just an opinion from one person. And I don't know if you have any more to add
Yeah,
on
and I
that.
think that's the same with like certain types of like submissions, variations and things. It will be escalated. You have your assessor and then it'll get brought forward to higher members of the team, just especially when there's some controversy.
Um, I guess I guess you could go in. I mean, especially if you use a consultancy like Jensen to represent you, you could go in with without company names and things like that, and you could present a situation rather than a specific, I guess. Not sure if we've done that really, Anna, have we? I've not done that in my experience. It's
Not in
often been
scientific advice, no.
no. And I think then it's also about if you are bringing your experts to the table, then it might be more obvious if they are working for a particular company, for example. But as I say, there can be situations where a consultancy would represent you and go and get the information for a particular scenario rather than being too specific with, the company name or the branding or things like that. But again, sometimes the naming can be really critical, especially if you're going through reclassification or a new application. The naming could be really critical. So, if you've got a brand attached, that obviously that could give away the company, I guess. But it depends what angle you're coming from there. Any further questions? With the MHRA, do you mean, or with, yes. I'm not sure on that, Anna. Do you know?
No, no, but I think it's treated as confidential conversation. They're not going to publish it anywhere.
No.
Um, yeah.
Okay. Anything from anyone? If not, I hope this has been very useful for you all. Like we say, this is our approach to scientific advice meetings. It's something we really enjoy taking part in. It's always, like we say, we have a real benefit of working in a consultancy because we get to see lots of different scenarios and have lots of different experiences. So scientific advice is a really good opportunity to delve into challenges that each client has. So hopefully, yeah, this has been helpful and been useful for you. If you do have any further questions or if you require any further support, like we say, Jensen R Plus, we are here for you to support with any of these, and you can contact either myself or Anna, or like we say, Ben, who's on the screen there, and we can look to have a conversation with you to help support.
Thank you very much, Wendy and Anna. Thank you. It's very informative. So if there's no other questions, the thank you email will be going out with the link to the YouTube, the recording, and also the slides as well. And that'll be beginning of next week. But thank you very, very much.
Well, and thank you for having us.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you
you.
very
Take
much.
care.
Thank you for your
Thank
time,
you.
everybody.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Bye.